Hello and happy Tuesday, everyone. What are we doing today? What are we doing? Are we doing anything that I was planning to do? Are we doing anything that has been preordained, pre-fated, predestined, precogitated, pre-cogstripated, pre-cog, pre-worm gear-alized, pre-multiple lever, just lever, pre-leverized, Have we? No, we're not. What we're doing is we're going to find a mangrove swamp, because this is not Build Mob Spawners channel. This is unbelievably frustrating slow burn about making house trees. And I've got a little collection. I did a little bit of inventory sorting. I did a little bit of work down in the tunnels, just to make it look nice, to give the bamboo room to grow. But, I am ready to hit the open road. I've established this area. I have some ideas. I have some plans, I have some plants. But none of that, even comes close to clothing a handle to going and finding a mangrove swamp, because it's a super cool tree type, and the fact that I say that that's what I'm looking for is probably going to make it take like 40,000 blocks. So I've got the coordinates up on the screen, because I actually want to know, if I say that I'm looking for that specifically, is that going to completely mess me up? No, because I have the best luck in the world, and everything turns out perfectly all of the time, and never goes wrong, because I forgot to bring my princess boots. So it's gonna be. Did I remember to bring a bucket? I remembered to bring 2 buckets. See, ADHD. You seem to have stopped eating my ADHD. So now I have more of it, which I think makes you more focused. So I'm going to go with that premise, and on the premises of that premise, and in the premises of these premises, I am just gonna explore, this beautiful, insane place, this insane mental landscape, definitely. I remember that there should be sound, but usually the only thing that y'all can hear is just the eating of the potatoes. But I feel strongly that the crunch is what makes it satisfying. It is the crunch that people truly crave the potato for. And if it don't got that crunch, it just won't munch. Gandhi said that. Mahatma Gandhi said that. And he was right. How has your week been? What have you done, with your life in general to this point? Do you feel satisfied with your legacy? Are you getting completely messed up by the flaming baby zombies in your life? The small things that you feel like you've dealt with 1,000 times, but this time it's just this time, and suddenly all the things that you think, oh, I know that, I know how to do that, just suddenly becomes hard again. And why is that? I think it's purely psychological. I think it's perfectly possible to master a skill and then never mess it up ever at all. And that's what I expect of myself. Believe it or not, it might seem contradictory to my behavior, but I do value, at least the idea of never missing. And, well, let's just say I pee the way I think, which is to say, sometimes I miss. Sometimes I do miss, and sometimes I'm wrong. Sometimes I make mistakes. Believe it or not, I am not a perfect you know, compost-based gremlin. What do I call myself? Ah! Okay, I gotta be a little bit more gentle with my health here. One thing I can do, because I brought a little supply of wood, is I can actually just straight up boat along, and sleep is a little bit more forgiving when you're on a boat, in my opinion. But, you know, feel free to disagree with me. Feel free to argue. You know, feel free to complain. And, you know, when I'm applying for jobs, right, I write on my resume, receives feedback gracefully, enjoys receiving feedback in order to optimize for the best possible results. And it took a lot of audacity to learn to just write it that way. To just lie through my teeth. I struggle with feedback. You know? And if you disagree, well, I'll fucking shake you. No, that's too early. I can't say that. That's too much. Yeah, no, that's too much. But, you know, I mean, there's, ooh, that's cool. I love the way the jungle sort of coast looks from here. I wonder if I should follow the coast or if I should just go straight out. And honestly, right now, I am feeling what we in the business of being sort of messed up little compost gremlins, we in that business, the little messed up compost gremlin business, always say that wanderlust counts as lust. So you can be a little weird about it. And that's what makes it fun. You have to make something, if you want to make it work for you, okay, this is my advice, this is my candid advice. If you want to make anything in your life work for you, you have to either humorize it or sexualize it. And if you don't do either of those two things, it'll never work. For practical implementations of this, go somewhere else, you know? I'll let you fill in the blanks, but that's your homework, okay? Think of a problem in your life that you've had forever, that you just can't get past it. You're like, I don't know how to drive, and I can't seem to get this, I can't seem to focus enough to make sure that I, at least portray a character that is very precise and reliable and does things in a perfectly repeatable way. So I have to make it funny or I have to sexualize it. And you'll never guess which one I chose in this scenario. I decided to make it funny. Yeah. The sense of humor here, and jokes become funnier when you explain them, is that this is extremely dangerous. Why am I doing this to myself? Obsidian, flint, unbreaking 1. That's pretty lame. But I do like the way that the water sort of looks there. How did I make it funny? Oh, this takes a bit of explanation. And I'd probably be doxing myself a little bit if I explained all of it. But let's just say sometimes it isn't about what it looks like. That's about what it is. And this is one of those scenarios. And it looks like it could be one thing, but it's actually driving lessons. But it looks like it could be something else, from an outside perspective. And that's funny to me. And the humor of it is what drives me. can't see the humor in it. No. Which do I need more, a boat or a crafting table? I'm gonna say the boat, because I'm really hoping that I can cross the ocean. But this is the wrong time to be going into the jungle. That's absolutely the case. I do think, though, that when one is struck with wanderlust, that is a type of lust. And so you automatically fulfill one of the two criteria, one of the two branches in the road. The two things which make it possible to enjoy anything in life, you know? Be it an uncomfortable scenario, be it a difficult hierarchy, be it a personal vulnerability that you don't want to broadcast to the world, you know? Yeah, you gotta sexualize that shit. That's just the only way. You gotta see it as some sort of like dommy-mommy scenario. At least if you're me, that's how you have to frame it. And then everything becomes totally fine. Then you're like, okay, now I can handle not getting my way in this scenario. Not 100%. You know? But I'm still a little brat. Just a little brat. And that keeps me sane. And so that's what I put on my resume. I enjoy getting electrocuted a little bit, in like a little bit of a weird way. In a little bit of a weird way. So. And that's how I became an electrician. I joked during the job interview that I liked licking wires. You can do incredible things through Craigslist. I swear, Craigslist is going to become a deity, you know, in far, you know, extreme far future, space colonies on Titan, you know, when the sun has just started to enter its red giant phase, and they're just trying to find a way to terraform it in the long run. I'm trying to scroll with a trackpad. Look at that. Look at the chaos of that. Okay? Look how messy that is. Now look how smooth it is with a mouse wheel. It's just a better experience, you know? It's a more effective communication. It's in stages, but computers think in stages. They don't think in, like, I don't know, like a rational space of an infinite gradient with infinite precision possible. I absolutely adore this little island. So when we have something like a cell phone, right, we're always going on these scales, and it's very difficult, I find, to achieve precision with a cell phone because it doesn't like having you do things in steps. Like the selection tool, right? You would think that on either end of the selection that you make, even if it decides for you what it thinks you want to select, whatever that is, whatever that space is, there could just be an arrow on either side of that, and you tap it as many times as there are characters. And if you want to go a little bit faster, you could hold it down, and then it goes at, like, typing speed, for example. Right? It's just letting a computer be a computer. It doesn't have to be a linear thing. I actually have opinions on technology, you know? I'm not immune to the fact that it exists, you know? It pervades our lives. I want it to be made out of plants, but that's a very far future sort of a dream. And if you can dream it, you can make it real. But I don't think any dream was meant to be dreamed alone. And I think that's why I talk about it with people. But living things are not really like that in terms of steps and notches. I mean, we're a chaotic machine in a floating soup of chemistry, and everything that needs to bump into everything else just bumps into everything else. And it all gets passed around in this chaotic storm or dance. That's what's happening in our cells. And so, can we linearly store perfectly accurate pieces of information in a living thing, in this thing which by definition is always changing? It's like writing a message in the sand or writing a message on the surface of the ocean. Our DNA is like that. It's shifting, always. So, is the purpose of storing information being able to store it for as long as possible? Because then we should be laser etching everything into silicon crystals. And I guess kind of we are, right? A hard drive kind of is sort of that. But it's not usually our memories, you know, our culture, our science, the things we've learned that we might not be able to relearn if civilization had to rebuild itself. What I call civilization, I mean, if certain technologies had to rebuild themselves, I don't think we live in a very civilization sort of era. We live in a state of constant war, and we deserve better than that. But being able to read and write off a hard drive, that's an incredible gift. Think about that. It's not something... It's more like a medium-term memory. You know, I mean, you can store something on a drive and put it away, but if you don't refresh it and keep the memory, oh, what is it that actually breaks down? I think on a hard drive, if you just leave it and don't touch it, it can last for like max 30 years. That's the number I remember. So it's not an enduring legacy to make videos. It's not something that would be remembered thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago. It's a present memory. It's a today memory. I mean, I don't know who you are. I don't know how you found this video. I don't know if you're even watching this video, you know? I mean, it's a small channel. It's a small channel. Occasionally people show up and sniff around, and it's pretty cool. I'm grateful for those people. And that's the work, if you've considered it. If you've considered what I have to offer, that's the work. So thank you, if you're here. And always be here. Always be where you are right now, in the present moment, because it's never going to happen again. They call it the cloning principle. It's the reason that you can't make a perfect clone in physics. They've proven that, like a logical proof, like a mathematical proof. You can't make a perfect clone of something, because in order to make a perfect clone of anything, you would have to know absolutely everything about it to an infinite level of detail. You would need perfect knowledge in order to completely, perfectly copy uh, one object to another object, for them to be identical. What scale is this? Is it like a single electron can count as an object because it's a wave function, and technically it probably has some properties that change over time, and in order for them to be identical that has to be the same throughout all eternity. But moments are the same. Moments are unique. And this moment won't last forever. What comes next, I don't know. But I feel like the tension is near. Everyone can tell the world is about to change. And it's Ship of Theseus, right? We're always changing. Every version of you, that wakes up isn't the same version that falls asleep. It's like getting replaced by an ever so slightly different version of yourself every single day. And you get to kind of mold and shape who that person becomes over your life. And every day you're doing it, whether you want to or not. You're training yourself. Molding yourself into a certain shape or form. And I worry that I'm shaping myself into someone who only talks about things and doesn't do them. Which I think is kind of funny. Because I actually do a lot. Definitely coming back for this. But we have a goal today. We have a specific point to reach. We have a specific outcome, right? We've lost openness to the moment for doing that. But I definitely don't have the equipment to face the Sea Temple right now. I would really like to have a bed if I was gonna do that. I would really like a bed if I was gonna do that. Besides, I want to find mangroves because they're neat. I like them a lot. I like that they put their roots down through seawater. They form complicated networked structures underwater. They increase the climate resiliency of the coast. Using that extremely loosely here. They help the coast resist erosion and kind of hold things together against all the surf and all the changing. And inland, then you can build. They protect you from storm surges, kind of hold back that water. I don't know exactly how. I mean, it's not a solid barrier, but I think it just interrupts the waves and sort of breaks them up. So the extremes aren't as extreme, and the middles, the normals, are more extreme, which makes them normal. It just levels things out. And the wood is this nice red color, and the way that they're generated in the game is much more complicated. They're complicated. I like that they have a lot of personality on an individual basis. That's not to say a jungle tree like this doesn't have its own personality, but you can see what I mean. It's definitely... it's definitely not a template. You can see what the normal version of it is supposed to be. Mangroves, you don't quite get that. What I am going to do, though, is I'm going to say, as we always do on this channel, fuck the frame rate, and let's see where the hell we are. Because I've gone in circles too many times now. I know I went this way, so I think I'm going to just try this way and see what happens. There was a world, a long time ago, that I had. I think I was 16 or something at the time. And it was much like this. Very, very, almost endless expanse of ocean. And I spawned on an island with one oak tree. And I remember my first night in that little dirt hole with a few saplings and like one torch. There were skeletons and zombies, and I had to fight and fight and fight just to put up a little basement, because all the mobs that were spawning, this was before water zombies, so all the mobs that wanted to spawn on my little island. So I had to fight them off and make myself a little cabin, and I made it cozy, and I got it nice, and I planted a lot of oak trees. That was a sort of traditional, like, plank house, you know? Yeah. And just the normal way to do it. And I got my first boat together, and I had to think, like, I'm gonna need enough food to cross whatever this ocean is. And so, I don't remember what I got. I had to do a lot of planning. I grabbed a lot of torches, I grabbed a lot of wood, I grabbed a lot of cobble. And a lot of food. And I just struck out. And I think it was something like 4 hours of real-world time just to get to the first island I could see. And then another to get to the nearest land of any kind, which was a desert. And I looked around, and I actually was able on that ocean eventually to find the mushroom biome. We should do a mushroom biome episode. That would be cool. Okay, that's a deal. If we run into a mushroom biome, I'll go for that. We're not really in mushroom biome territory. I think we need at least 10,000 blocks in one direction at least. Say my name. Say my name. Isn't that one direction? I hope I'm annoying someone out there. I hope someone's like just fuming. Like, that's not One Direction. But, you know, there is only one direction. And that's forward. You can never go back. Like, even if I etched this video with a laser into a titanium crystal and launched it into deep space, right? And it lived for 10 billion years as this extremely durable physical object. What are the chances that someone would be able to see it then? Right? What are the chances that anything with the intelligence and the ability to understand us, which I think is much more unlikely and much rarer, that they'd be able to understand our technology to the point where they could read the information of this and then put it into a video format the way that it's intended to be, like with the colors and the sounds and everything all projected. They'd have to know how to make all of our technology. They'd have to know how to make a laptop the way we make it, you know? It would be like a historical reenactment of unbelievable proportions. And I just don't think that's realistic, to be totally honest. I just don't see that being possible. So how do I reach across the void, right? And make a difference here and now, without waiting for some distant future that might never come, right? I need to strangle an ivy into the right shape. Twist it forwards and backwards on itself over and over again. Train it just perfectly so that it fills in a certain grid, a certain dimension. Am I going to find mangroves in the ice? Probably not, but like, look at that view. That's the vista. I don't know what else we're gonna find, but that's the vista for this week. And once I've strangled the ivy into that zigzag pattern that fills in just the right amount of space, and once I remember to fix the render settings, oh yeah, I definitely wanted to learn how to play the game that I've played for a decade. We're definitely far from our starting point. So that's good. We haven't lost, like, dimensionality. We're still increasing in distance along one of these axes. But I gotta keep moving on. And once I've twisted it into that shape, I'm going to tattoo bioluminescent diatoms into the surface. They're not diatoms. What are they called? I call them sea sparks. They're bioluminescent algae that grow in the water, in the ocean, and they glow when you touch them. But they're an ephemeral phenomenon. They're only around for a short time and then they're gone. And people have learned how to grow them in sterile media, and if you keep it in sterile media and you don't introduce any bacteria, You can kind of keep them going. Not forever, but for a long time. But they like seawater, and something like an ivy likes fresh water. They're two very different organisms with very different needs. Now it would be easier, probably, to transfer the genes from the Pyrocystis fusiformis into the ivy, and then have the ivy express the ability to make these flashes of light. It's signaled by calcium rushing into the cell, and that changes the conformation. The luciferase enzyme that breaks down luciferin and releases light, so you get these little blue sparks along the surface of the ocean. In order to do that genetically, you'd have to sublocalize all of that to one side of the ivy plant. Right? So the same mechanism, right? It just lights up where you touch it. Start with that on one side of the ivy. And then, yes, train it back and forth. You could grow them in a parallel process, right? If you start from seeds, you can sort of normalize and get a baseline, how long it's going to take, what configuration you need to get the result you're looking for. Maybe a series of pins if you want a robot to do it. In a sterile environment, train them. Okay? Zigzag back and forth. It's a simple pattern. And then it's got this light that glows when you touch it. So there you've got almost a touch-sensitive display and a light-emitting display. The part that's missing isn't the touch sensitivity, because plants can feel touch, or at least they send signals in response to feeling touch. I would argue that means that they feel touch, because we feel touch. No one would argue with you if you said you felt touch. And the only thing we can observe that results from you being touched, other than the physical changes of your tissues, I guess, would be, the nerve signals that get passed along. So, signaling and sensation, I would argue, go hand in hand. I think it's cruel to say that they don't, because even if I'm wrong, I still could be right. And so, there's always a possibility of inflicting pain. So even if you don't believe in that pain, you have to at least believe in the possibility that you might be inflicting pain. So how do we make it fun for the plants? How do we make it a good experience for the plants? Because I don't think that any relationship where you're trying to manipulate or coerce or force without providing a reciprocal benefit is going to be a good relationship. Not that providing reciprocal benefit allows for balance in and of itself. It doesn't. There's a village. It's a very nice village. And it has sheep. And monsters spawning in the neighborhood. And it has beds. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna make a bed, I'm gonna leave, you know? It's like this equivalent of making myself a sandwich, you know? In my underwear, in their kitchen, and then just leaving. Just made a bun me in your kitchen, bye. Sorry, you're out of cilantro. I should try that. I need to do that. I need to, that's, you know, are you really friends with your friends if you can't make a banh mi in your underwear? This is good cave diving country. Look at that. Look at that. That's a gallery. Okay. This area is, well, it's attracting me. Let's just say it's attracting me. I like it. But what's missing isn't the touch sensation. What's missing is the display portion. What's missing is addressing all of the cells on that surface. So for that, you need a microprocessor. Okay, I don't know these words. I don't know what the word microprocessor means. But what I do know is I want to make bed, sir. And we're napping during the day. You know, it's time to get up. They need something that can send variable pulses in time with delay, right? It's a linear channel, so there's just one proportionality to worry about. You send a pulse, and that pulse takes 30 microseconds or whatever the unit is actually to get to cell number 12, for example, or cell 12 million, right? It's just a matter of sending the right length of the signal, or at least the right, well, does the distance that it travels, is that proportional to the pulse? Right? Is the signal able to propagate from plant cell to plant cell? You need something that tickles the meat in just the right way. And it's better if that thing is smaller. So it's the equivalent of, like, probably, yes, a microchip. I don't know what the word is now, but a small little processing unit that has the ability to generate an image. So that is an extremely detailed, fine-grained structure. And the way that we make it is by etching silicon chips, not silicon, but silicone, which makes it sound even more like caulking. And this is not about caulk, okay? No. Get your head, you know, into a normal way. Into a normal, usual, sort of a nice way. I will trade you for some bamboo. Extremely in a normal way, you know, in an okay way, you know. We didn't talk about it, and some rotten flesh. No, actually, sorry, that's like half of my food source. What am I doing? Wheat seeds, I don't need wheat seeds. Here, so in the long run, it might just be the most efficient way to make these little mathematical machines that make the logic of carrying and sending video. It might be that we have found the best way to do it. Right? Shining lasers and using their intersections, I assume, to etch out little channels that electrons can follow, and that they're designed in such a way that they'll do the mathematical operation that they need to do. Like, that's how at least math on a computer works. You have to figure out you have to start with a solution and then work your way backwards. So if you want to multiply 2 by 2, you need a configuration of logic gates that takes 1 by 2 and outputs 2, and 2 by 1 and outputs 2, and 2 by 2 and outputs 4, and 1 by 1 and outputs 1. And you have to literally, 1 by 1, walk your way through all of those combinations and make sure, right, that each one results in the right one. And so then you have something that can do multiplication. And you go through the list. Multiplication, division, addition, subtraction. And it just gets more complicated from there. Like, already, just at that threshold of the most basic level of it, it's not trivial to do that. I think it intimidates people. And it's the same as like learning to count when you're a child. It feels impossible. You're like, I don't understand what people are talking about. They keep holding their fingers up and making these words with their mouths, and I'm supposed to make a connection between these, and now we're supposed to add them together, and now we're supposed to like graph them. Like it just keeps going. It never stops. Math just gets as complicated as you want it to be able to get. There's no. This is a guess. This is just my guess. So don't take this as a fact, or even a factoid, or but there's no limit to how complicated math can get. And so there's no limit to how complicated computers can get, and how complicated the math that computers need to be able to do can get. And a laser working on a solid substrate can make a specific series of paths. We know we can do that because that's how we do it. That's how this is happening. You know, that's how you're able to watch this. It's because someone made the machine that's able to do that. And that's it. Now, in the bark of a tree, right, there are a bunch of little benzyl substituted rings. It's benzyl. It's a 6-membered carbon atom. All of the carbon atoms are sp2 hybridized. Forget the word sp2 hybridized. What it means is all of the atoms are connected to 3 others at equal proportions. So like a steering wheel. Those 3 connections all have a straight connection that just goes straight across, and they all have an extra connection that looks like this. And it also goes across. But the orbitals that the electrons inhabit, the electrons being a wave, the orbitals go up, and they overlap on the side. So that is what's called a pi bond. And a pi bond is special because in an extended system of pi bonds, you can transmit electrons. So free electrons of high energy from elsewhere. Free has a specific meaning. High energy electrons from an arbitrary source, right, in the world, can travel through those extended pi systems. That's a wonderful cave. Look at that. That sheet of water. Both of them. This is... This is why it's nice to have the coordinates. Because I don't have to linger here and do anything with it. But if I want to come back, I know my place. I know... I have a map now. Yeah. Some would say, right, just make maps in Minecraft. They made it too complicated, and it stopped being fun. I like coordinates. They're simple. You only need to know 3 pieces of information to find anything. Well, 4. You need to know the X, Y, and Z, and you need to know what about that particular location is relevant to you. What do you like about it? Right. So maybe we figured out the best way to make a computer chip, and if we're going to make, a cellular display out of real cells, we're going to need to just integrate them with a computer chip that can do the math in a precise way that is going to be repeatable and isn't going to vary too much over time, right? Because a living system that's wired in a certain way, even if you could manually train all the little cells around, right, it wouldn't be able to stay in that configuration forever, and even for a long time maybe, right? And then it would start getting the math wrong. And so we couldn't have that, because you need the math to be right to get the result you're looking for, to capture that moment. And that's what your brain is doing right now. Your brain is exactly the machine that exists to capture this current moment. And it's made out of living cells. It's just alive, and it's exactly what it needs to be for you to be experiencing exactly what you're experiencing. And the best life, I would argue, is the one in which you experience the most possible moments. Right? That there's more of it. So the more you check out of it, the less life you live. Right? The more things you repeat, the less life you live. Computers are great, don't get me wrong. I mean, 1,000 people can watch the same thing, right? Like Blade Runner. I've never watched Blade Runner. But 1,000 people can watch the same thing, and they pick up kind of the same things in it, but each person is going to receive that piece of media just a little bit differently. And so it's almost like, even though you've copied the same information 75,000 times, you've delivered a completely unique experience each time. That multiplication feels valuable, right? And it becomes a connecting thread. More than one person can experience that and its impact on their brain, and they can relate to each other about that experience. So I don't think it divides us, and I don't think it diminishes our life. Life is precious. I think that's the long and the short of it. And I think if we recreated organic plant brains that ran on solar energy, that could live forever on the planet because they're able to photosynthesize, and then are able to spread their spores to other planets and inhabit other planets in far-flung regions and set up their own plant brains. They could live under the sun as long as there is fusion. And what would they dream of? Maybe they would dream exactly the dream that you are having now. And maybe one day you'll wake up in a plant-based reality. And people ask, "Oh, how did you sleep last night?" And you'll be left trying to explain this experience to those on that side of this multidimensional plane. It's a mirror image. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Here's a simulated forest in a simulated world, living on grids and lines in linear increments. And the way that all of these sp2 hybridized carbons passing around electrons in the lignin, in the subsurface layer, it's the exterior layer. It's the layer over the cambium on top of the wood. It's the first non-living structure. Now, those aromatic rings, those are sp2 hybridized, but there are sp3 hybridized carbon atoms. Now forget what sp2 hybridized means and sp3 hybridized means. sp2, steering wheel. Okay? The steering wheels connect to a bunch of I guess four-way intersections, but evenly spaced over the surface of a sphere. They call it a tetrahedron, but I don't think that'll help anyone. I could call it a D4, which will help the TTRPG players and no one else, or the geometry nerds and the TTRPG players and no one else. But the point is, those aren't able to pass on electrons. They aren't conductive like a wire is. So the signals can travel a short way and then stop. A short way and then stop. So even though the overall structure is very chaotic and disorganized, there's a bunch of electrically conductive little chain links, all connected by non-conductive bonds. So there's an opportunity to connect those hybridized regions, to connect those conductive little fuckers to one another. And if you can conduct between them, then you've just created a wire. So they're just shy of being able to make what I would call like a molecular nanowire. And I just can't remember what to Google about the chemistry. It's like, imagine ethylene, right? It's a double bond. Or maybe you need to go higher. Maybe you need to go ethylene, which is a triple bonded carbon, triple bonded to another carbon. So you can use the electrons that are participating in that third bond to each attach to one benzyl ring on each neighbor. Right? But then what's the leaving group? I hear you ask. You, so versed in organic chemistry, the leaving group would have to be hydrogen. So you could maybe lower the energy threshold by releasing dihydrogen, but you're still producing hydrogen and introducing a low molecular weight volatile gas. It's a recipe for lighting the whole thing on fire. And I think there's a more elegant solution, which is just to put a wire in the bark, not even pushing it in, like run it along the bark and pound it in with a mallet. You can't use it right away, but wood is an insulator. So as the bark grows, the wire is pressed into the cambium. The cambium has to grow around the wire. It grows such that it encloses the wire, and then the wood just keeps going on afterwards, laying down more cellulose, acting as the insulator. So it would be a wire then jacketed in that outer bark, that lignin, right? And then surrounded by, yeah, a little insulator, a little insulation action, baby. Just pound the wire into the surface of the tree, like an animal would do, like a fucking cave human would do. Just beat it in there with a hammer. It's the most elegant solution. And if you want to make tiny circuits, you just need a very, very tiny hammer. But you can make a wire smaller by stretching it. Right? Just keep stretching it, it'll get thinner and thinner. It'll eventually reach, a breaking point where it can't go any further and get any thinner. It just doesn't have the tensile strength. You can get as far as you need to. The trick is just getting it in there, to be quite honest, to be quite frank with you. It's just getting it in there. You need to be able to apply enough force and make sure that it continues gripping, that it doesn't get ejected by random motion free of the surface of the tree. It needs some kind of adhesion, some kind of clinging force to be able to stick to it. Static charge, maybe? So you'd have to keep it in some level of power, even if it's a very low level of electricity, a low voltage, a low amperage, whatever, right? But would you have to keep it charged so that it sort of sticks to the tree until the tree then grows around it? And how long does that take? I think it'd be under a year, but that's still a long time to wait for your wires to insulate themselves, right? It's just a different type of thinking. Because in one mode of thinking, we do all the work, and the person who installs it just has to think about the last step. Versus, the tree does 99% of the work, and we just sit back and do something else in the meantime. It's a mindset where we have something else to do with the rest of the time. To be quite honest with you. Where it's not about getting the wires in the wall as fast as possible. Where it's about getting the wires in the wall in the most humane way possible for people, for the planet, and for animals. How do we balance those things? How do we live for kindness? Bashing wires into trees. Just bashing wires into trees. They insulate themselves. As long as you don't mess it up, you can just splice wires like you splice wires. Wire caps and everything. Because otherwise you'd have to measure out every piece and know exactly how long it's going to be. Or I guess you could make some sort of genetic cocktail that clings to copper ions and express that on the surface of the trees so that they pick up copper and you have to introduce the copper over time and slowly build up a line that's like integrated genetically. But like, you just do it with a hammer, right? You just bash it in there with a hammer. But how does that make a computer? What if you took the video and you did it backwards? You took the video and you converted that back into a signal. And then you ran that signal backwards through time and etched that into the surface of the part. I guess what I'm saying is there could be addition of new bonds in order to make conductive jumps. There could also be subtraction of bonds in order to disallow certain transfers. The lignin is a chemically complicated and varied environment. It's tangled. There's a couple different bonding sort of structures that happens between them, and because of the way that the combinations work, it is like a twisted tree. It never sort of ends up in the same place. But it has certain overall bulk characteristics. It will be a matter of separating the behavior from adding bonds to reducing bonds to a single form of input that is, it either is or it isn't. And you need to be sure that where you want it to be is, it is, and where you want it to be isn't, it isn't. Reliable, repeatable. Something you could etch in with a laser. And then you'd have some weirdo with his like laser machine coming up to your house tree and etching a little computer into the bark and putting a little sticker on it that says, you know, this is a computer now. Don't hit it with a hammer. Note to electricians, underline, 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 don't hit it with a hammer, I don't want to come back. You know, that's what it'll say on the sticker. And then there'll be like a computer exhibit. Right? I mean, that's how we do it. We take a big laser and we etch a bunch of fancy math into a crystal chip. Like, it sounds like it sounds made up. It sounds like a wizard came up with that. Like, it sounds like elf magic. It doesn't sound like a real thing. But it's real, you know? It's all around you. You see it, you know? I mean, it's running drones and warfare and all this surveillance, all the unnecessary surveillance of people who just want to live their lives and don't want to be controlled by authoritarianism, and, you know, pumpkins, evil pumpkins, you know, and so why not just use the same equipment to laser etch like a living tree, right? I mean, what if we had to lose, you know, thousands of dollars in research funding? Potentially millions if it looks like maybe it might work. But it's not a semiconductor. It's like more of a resistor. But you can create signals. And then the other thing is carbon nanotubes. Just getting carbon nanotubes to crystallize from the lignin. That would make a wire. But the conditions are like thousands of degrees Celsius or 1,000 degrees Celsius. It's enough to start serious fire hazard, right? But high temperature and pressure and just the right conditions, you can get carbon into a vapor phase where it starts to sort of deposit on top of itself and form that structure, and the stability is what allows it to come out of, this vapor phase, and so it becomes this like growing crystal on a surface. That's one way to do it. So there's multiple things, right? There's like genetic tools, right? Over time, maybe we could selectively breed plants with different traits that are able to do certain things that we hadn't really thought of plants as being able to do, right? I mean, the shame plant survives because it's interesting. People poke it and it makes a reaction. It makes a physical reaction. The leaves move. They fold up like little dragonfly wings. And that's just bonkers cool, in my humble opinion. And they exceed copper for resistance anyway. It's lower resistance, sending electrons down a carbon nanotube versus a copper wire. Not to say one is just better than the other. I mean, you could almost think of a carbon nanotube as like a electrically conductive. Well, I mean, it's a carbon compound. Carbon has so many personalities. I want to say diamond, but diamonds are all sp3 hybridized. So there's no electrical conductivity. So it's finding the conditions that would etch diamond and etch carbon nanotubes into a tree's surface and sort of control the three-dimensional structure of that. That sounds like Fourier transform sort of territory. But I don't know the first thing about these physics. I'd have to learn something. Terrifying, terrifying prospect. No, you just gotta bash some wires into trees. But it's an evolution thing. A tree that's able to capture your attention, or a leaf that's able to capture your attention, right? If that is connected to its reproduction, which is to say, if you connect it to one of the two pillars, which is to sexualize that shit, then it's a survival advantage. So if you can grow an iPad, and people like the iPad, and you can grow another one from the cutting, then the best iPads will naturally evolve over time. So the first step, we could get it faster than just the rate of Darwinian evolution, but the first step is making a leaf that can glow, that can glitter, that can sparkle, that can do that little trick. But unless it can live in the world unless it can be shared among people freely, without being owned by a specific corporation or individual, unless it can be free from the structure of capitalism, I don't think it will achieve what it's able to achieve. I think we will always be selling ourselves short. But capitalism isn't even the point. You have plants in your house. You can share them with people. You can ask for money, but you don't have to. You can get money from other things, and then pay for more plants. Pay for the space for the plants, pay for the water, pay for the soil, pay for the pots. Or you can pick a plant up out of the dirt and put it in a paper cup and just get it all from nature. Get it all from what's in your immediate environment. So plants exist. Bioluminescent plants. Just need to be everywhere before they're anywhere. Or else, the worst people in the world will attempt to control them and decide who has access to glowing plants and who does not have access to glowing plants, who does not have access to the future. I don't think I'm finding this mangrove. I'm going to be very honest. I am getting a little discouraged. I'm getting a little antsy. Because I've said, this is a precious moment. And it's best to savor and enjoy it. But here I am talking about something that is neither here nor there. Hasn't been realized, hasn't been done, hasn't been dreamed of, hasn't been released into the world. And sometime after 2020 isn't seeking expression everywhere as we speak. Because that would be lame. You'd be trying to control other people. Trying to force them into your reality. And yet, I've been forced into the reality of climate change. I've been in that reality my entire life. I was forced into the reality of capitalism. And the purpose of my life has been to break the wheel. Now, whether or not I have succeeded, I have attempted to break the wheel. And if you, dear viewer, have have the power to try. Try. It will be a single act that breaks the siege. And I accept the consequences of my actions, whatever they may be. Pyrocystis fusiformis, Magnetospirillum, Magnetotacticum, digested with MHI, ligated into a plasmid downstream of a plastid localization signal. The entire genome of each organism, randomly digested. Random genes, just a random grab bag. Ligated into the plasmid, transformed into agrobacterium. Apply liberally. The plastid localization signal, GPT-2, expressed in pollen grains, not in the adult plant. In 1936, 3758. That number is going down. We want that number to be going up. We want for this number to be going down. So we want to be heading in this direction. And just like that, I have a heading. Not expressed in the adult plant. No visible phenotype. Only beneficial characteristics carry forward. So if there are any beneficial characteristics in Magnetospirillum or Pyrocystis that benefit adult trees throughout their life cycle, or adult plants, how general is this? It's pretty general for Arabidopsis. It's the cauliflower myxovirus promoter. Any beneficial trait from those two organisms at any stage of the life cycle, sampling the entire life cycle from embryonic development for beneficial traits conferred by any genes from those two organisms. I don't need all of them. I just need one. To break down the barrier between the organisms. They have homologous genes. When they encounter each other in the environment, there's a chance that complementarity draws more genes into the whole, collecting them in little clusters. And there's a cluster in Magnetospirillum that allows it to generate extremely small magnets, extremely small magnetic crystals of hematite. Branch tips expressing little nanomagnets, seeking out nanomagnets, seeking each other out, merging, connecting, branch to branch, tip to tip, like a handshake. Bioluminescence, growing on the branches, growing from the ground, populating the sky with its spores, the moss storm. I mean, I don't mean to beat you over the head with it, but it's all connected. I never wanted the world to stay the same forever. I never wanted the world to try to be one thing forever. I wanted to see the future. And I didn't want it to be in the hands of power. Those who had power over me. Those who used their positions of power over me. I wanted it to be in my hands, and I wanted it to be my responsibility. It was an extremely selfish thing to do, and I don't regret it. Because we're at the edge of a precipice. As things are the way they are, we don't know if humanity will survive the next century. We have already initiated extremely dire consequences for ocean circulation, for photosynthesis, for overall temperatures. Oil and gas companies have been saying for years that carbon capture and storage is the solution, but it just encourages complacency because it's not an effective solution. What is effective is using renewable energy to replace oil and gas consumption, and then not to consume the oil and gas. We're in the midst of a chaotic experiment run by corporate oligarchs. And I don't think it's fair that they're the only ones who get to experiment. Everything I did was for a reason. And that reason was to give life on Earth a fighting chance against the oligarchs. Not humanity, but the oligarchs. And it cost me nearly everything. And admitting it now, openly, declaring it openly, in English, is an incredibly foolish thing to do. But in the words of Mahatma Gandhi, players gonna play, play, play. The haters gonna hate, hate, hate. So shake it off. Yeah, shake it off. What are the chances I get the items back? Not if I cheat. This way. That's where I went. Now, let's choose the approach a little more cautiously this time. There's a canyon, there's a waterfall. I'm going to use the waterfall to rappel down into the bottom of the canyon, and then I'm going to run the length of the canyon from the bottom. Or I could do a series of controlled descents, which is what I call it, when I brain myself on the rocks over and over again. And I know that y'all love watching that part, because it's funny to watch me suffer. I learned a long time ago that that was the thing that people really appreciated about me. That was the thing that people really liked. Was when I would mess something up and get all distressed. That's why, for me, nothing works unless I can humorize it or I can sexualize it. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm SymbioSister. I have a Patreon. Feel free to support me for as little as $1 a month. Have a wonderful week. Have a wonderful time. Remember, we have to ban all fossil fuels now. Even in the midst of some kind of genetic chaos, plants still need to be able to grow, right? Burning more CO2, burning more fuels, releasing more fossil CO2, just gives them more to work with. It's too late to stop it. I love you all. I hope it turns out well, and I have no idea what's going to happen next. And it is always Tuesday. Like, comment, share, subscribe.